I see it.
Boker Tov and good morning. I'm Rabbi Stephen Moskowitz of Congregation Lador Vador, and this is Monday Musings, my, I guess, weekly show that offers a spiritual kickstart to the week. I'm joined today by Marc Greenberg, who's the Executive Director and co-founder of the Interfaith Assembly on Homelessness and Housing in New York City. I'm really looking forward to learning from Marc and learning about his work and his passion for this work and what more perhaps we can do as a congregation. So Marc, I thought we would begin. How did you get started in this work? You've been doing it for so long. How did it begin?
Thank you for inviting me and for the opportunity to share a little bit of my story. So, well, in 1980, I attended an event at the Cathedral St. John the Divine. I just learned about it through a network, attended this event called the Earth Community. And it was a 3-day event in which people from different communities around the world talked about how they were living in harmony with their environment and each other. And it was incredibly inspiring for me. And at the end of about 300 people attended. At the end of the event, I think I asked the question, who lives in New York? And about 150 people said yes. So I said, well, wouldn't it be great if we continued this conversation? And if 3 days later, I get a call from Jim Morton, who was the dean of the cathedral at the time, and said, Marc, how'd you like to continue that conversation? How'd you like to meet with me and some others? So that was, he kind of invited me into the conversation at this Episcopal cathedral. And through my connection with him and with Bishop Paul Moore, I got introduced to this whole network of these incredible religious leaders, including Marshall Meyer and Balfour Brickner and Mark Tannenbaum and bishops and imams. And it opened up my eyes to this world of people of faith who were very committed to changing our world. Now, I had grown up Jewish, bar mitzvah, normally observe Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, but I had never seen how to apply my own spirituality in a larger way. And it just blew my mind. It opened up my worldview immeasurably. So after a few years of exploring the interests of the folks that we helped bring together, I helped start a food program, a soup kitchen at the Cathedral St. John the Divine, which is operating till this day. And then a few years later, I found my interest move in the direction of homelessness. And in effect, what we did was we asked this question. We organized our group and we asked this question. We'd go to soup kitchens and shelters and drop-in centers and welfare hotels, and we'd say, no matter what your faith, is this what God is asking us to do as a people? Can't we do any better? And then we'd go down to City Hall when this budget was being finalized, and we'd stay overnight one night a year, and we'd ask the question. We'd bear witness to the crisis. As the budget was being finalized in New York City, we'd say, is this what we can do? Is this the best we can do as a people of whatever your faith or no faith? And that really was how it started. As a matter of fact, I have a t-shirt here because we ended up doing this overnight vigil for 28 years in a row. This is our 26th, I think it was in 2011. Or 2000, I'm not sure what the date is, but anyway, for 28 years in a row, we went down to City Hall every year, one night a year, and asked that question. But what happened in 1988 was really changed the direction of my group, because we started out with 400 people it was at Trinity Church at the time. We had Ruth Messenger, and who was about to be borough president, was city council, and we had Floyd Flake, who at that point was a congressman as well as a minister, preach. March into the park, ready to spend the night, 100 people ready to spend the night. Torrential rainstorm, 12 of us made it to the morning. But of those 12, 6 of us were homeless. And we then had arranged to meet with city council members, including Ruth Messenger. And we said, well, what should we be aware of in the budget? And they told us, but what they said to the folks who were homeless was, but we're the 8 members of the council. We came here because we're the 8 members of council who care about homelessness. The people you need to talk to, the people who didn't come to this meeting. And the folks who were with us said, well, then we want to talk to the other members. We want to go back into the park. We want to stay until the budget's over. And we said, well, that could be 30 days out on the street. And they said, look, some of us already live out of the street, but we were just told we can make a difference. And a light bulb went off in my mind. because I had really never had much contact with homeless people. For me, actually, until that hunger event a number of years ago, hunger was just a concept. But when we organized this event and 1,200 people came to have lunch the day before Thanksgiving, it just dug right into my soul. I cried because I realized I had never been hungry, and how fortunate I was that I had never experienced that, and how sad it is that so many people were experiencing that on a daily basis. So that experience of seeing homeless people saying, how can we want to make a difference? That just blew my mind. And as a result of that, we developed a series of programs to help homeless people get back on their feet. And I think one of our graduates and one of our facilitators, Dennis, has spoken to your congregation.
Yeah, we're very fond of Dennis. He speaks to our 7th grade and their parents every year and tells his story and bears witness to his struggle. Do you think you can articulate, what pulled you in initially?
Well, I think it was that day, really. I think it was that day when we organized this event on hunger. We were talking about, we wanted to have a conference on hunger. And then as we were planning it, we realized, we're going to be talking about hunger all day. We're not going to be feeding a single person. Just that a little absurd. And so we organized an event, and we had all these great volunteers. We were storing turkeys down at the basement of Nathan's. We were working with Nathan, with the grandson of Nathan, hand worker. And we had all this food, and then we had very few people coming in. And some volunteers said, we know where homeless people are. They printed up flyers. They went to Harlem, they went to the Bronx. All of a sudden, we had 1,100 people who were served. And that's when it just kind of, rung true to me. I'd never experienced that before. I mean, grew up in Long Island. The only black people
never experienced what before? You never experienced what before?
That kind of need, that level of hunger. 1,200 people, 1,100 people who come and have a meal because they were hungry. That was totally beyond my experience. It was a concept for me. Hunger and homelessness was a concept. It wasn't a reality. When I saw these folks, I just realized how blessed I was in my life. And also, I'm Jewish, but I also have a kind of a Buddhist sensibility, and I really feel connected. I feel that you and we are all one. I really feel we're all one family. And so these people are my people. This is me. This is my blood. I'm hungry out there, but I have a privilege. I have the power to do something about it because of the privilege I have. Doesn't God call me to do that? I think so.
I think it's remarkable and so admirable how you put yourself and how you identify so wholeheartedly with the struggles of so many. I think, growing up on Long Island, so you know this well, and we've spoken about this. Right. I mean, it's very easy for us to go about our daily existence and be unaware of the struggles, which are in fact just perhaps a mile or two from my house. Right. But because we get in our cars all the time and just go from place to place, we can be oblivious to it. But part of what I think you offer is that you're choosing not to be oblivious to this. You're choosing not to ignore that. And that is an active choice that we have to make.
That's true. I'm choosing not to ignore what I know is true. I'm choosing not to deny the suffering that I am a part of. Now, how wide can we go? I mean, I'm not dealing with Africa. I'm dealing with New York City. I feel that that's big enough for me to be able to get my arms around, and that's big. But I feel that if we can make a difference in New York, then the world can see that we can make a difference. And clearly, we have the resources to make a difference. We have the intelligence to make a difference. And I think we have the will to make a difference. So now my work is in trying to work with elected officials and religious leaders and public policy advocates and housing and service providers. And I think I try to bring in I try to make sure there's one conversation we're all a part of. Now, for example, on the Upper West Side, what happened because of COVID, because of the crowding in the shelters, we were very concerned that there'd be a spread in the shelters. So my colleagues pushed the city to try to open up hotels. And we've now moved, I think, 14,000 of the 17,000 singles into hotels. And we've actually reduced the spread of COVID tremendously. There were over 100 deaths the first month. Now we've had less than 30. What's happened, though, is now, remember, New York City has an obligation to provide shelter to anyone who needs it. So we take people who are on drugs, people who are mentally ill, we take anybody. And it's taken there up on the Upper West Side. There's a hotel, the Lucerne, that's now housing 288 men with a substance abuse issue. Some of them, most of them are dealing with the issue, some are not. And so now the Upper West Side, which I think is probably one of the most progressive parts of the country, is seeing these Black and brown people on their streets, and some of them doing not good things. And so I'm actually going to be part of a city council, a community board meeting tonight. I think 1,900 people have signed up already. I'll be making a few remarks. And what I'm bringing to the table is, listen, yeah, it's uncomfortable to see homeless people, to see people who are struggling with substance abuse. It's uncomfortable for us, but how about for them? They're there because of terrible struggles they've had. So that's the homeless programs, the homeless system should be for the homeless people. That's who it's for. If we're not serving them, what are we doing? Now, these problems were in the shelter before we got them into the hotel. We just didn't see them.
Right.
Now we get to see them. And what can we do? And what I'm suggesting is let's include their voices, their agency in the conversation. I've been working with homeless folks for 30 years. This community of homeless, self-help community. I know that they have leadership within the community. I know that they want to be part of the solution, just like that the folks who said we want to go back into the park. That was when it first hit me. They want to help, but you got to ask them, how can you help? Can you help? Can you be role models? Can the better of you be role models for the other people who, why are they there? They're there because everything fails. And why are they doing drugs? It's because they don't have much else to look forward to. So that's the point that I'm going to be making. Let's include them in the conversation. Let's give them a chance to be role models to others. And I think, as my friend who heads this homeless self-help group said, Mark, if there are no problems in the shelter, there are going to be no problems in the neighborhood. Let's find out what their issues are. Let's try to help them resolve their issues.
I know Dennis has always told us, every time he comes to the synagogue and speaks to the students and the parents, he's like, the shelter's the last place I ever wanted to go. He used the word terrifying. I mean, he said, you had to hold on to whatever small belongings you brought with you. And so it seems to me that this is almost a better situation currently. It's safer.
Right.
It gives people more opportunity. These crowded shelters there are all sorts of problems there. Even when there wasn't the risk of COVID,
right.
I would imagine that still colds and disease could travel through a large crowded facility like that as well.
It's still better, but the problem is, I'll tell you something interesting. We had the folks at City Hall Park. When it got cold, we found a church for them to sleep at overnight, and they came back during the day. There was a bus that would go past City Hall, past the church where they were staying, on its way to the shelter. These guys walked that mile instead of going into the bus. The mindset in that bus of the people in the shelter was so demoralizing, they didn't want to be a part of it. I mean, we know you go to a congregation, there's a certain culture, there's a certain mindset. People are encouraging, people are reverent. Same thing in the opposite way in the shelter. These people see themselves as worthless. They see each other as worthless. I mean, remember the image that we have as the public of homeless people see that same image. They believe it. They believe they're worthless. In fact, our work is really to help people to love themselves until they can remember, help love them until they can remember to love themselves. I always say, we meet people as we interview, they are not who they are. They've forgotten who they are. They remember who they are in community. They remember who they are when people respect them, then they can respect themselves. It's not easy, but that's what we have to do. We have the privilege of being able to do that because we can see ourselves positively, and we need to embrace them and say, what's going on? What's happening? They'll say, well, I just lost my wife and I lost my, there's a lot of healing that's needed. There's a lot of listening that's needed. Once they're listened to, everybody needs to be heard. People need to be valued. I think that's what's missing. It's not easy, but I think that's the task.
I think it's a very powerful image to love them so that they can then love themselves. I mean, I think that's extraordinarily powerful. And Dennis, and I know I keep quoting from Dennis, but I consider him a teacher of mine. He's often said that the most difficult thing was not being hungry, but being ignored by other people. Right. People just looking past him as they walked on the street or stepping over him. Right. He said the hunger he could almost deal with. Right. But I do want to talk about what more can people do, especially during these times of COVID. I mean, you can't serve a meal to 1,200 people, can you?
Well, the meals that are being served now, and some people very courageously are still serving meals. In fact, the folks that I talked about, the homeless self-help group, this group called Life Experience and Faith Sharing Associates, they're still doing some feeding. They're also still doing some support groups. They had a 40-man and a 40-woman support group once a month. Now that what they're doing is they're meeting 4 weeks a month. The men are meeting 10 men a night, once a week, and 10 women at night once a week, 4 weeks a month, so that 40 people socially distancing in the park with their masks on are supporting each other because they see each other. They are there for each other. So, but it's much harder. Most people are doing these, I call drop and go or whatever they are. People come, stand in line, get a bag and go.
And then leave, yeah.
Yeah, which is great. As far as I know, the city has done an unbelievable amount, and so small nonprofits to make sure that people are not hungry. So that hopefully still is not a problem. Now, some people also, are homebound. They're getting their meals delivered. Let me say the first thing I think I may have mentioned this before. I love this quote from Pasteur that fortune favors the prepared mind. So I would suggest it's important to know about homelessness, even if we can at that moment have an impact, because when the opportunity presents itself, we then can. So we were very successful, for example, before COVID, and really over a number of 4 years, we had 4 or 5 great successes. Unbelievable. We were on a great run. We got the city and the state to commit to building 35,000 supportive housing units over 15 years. We got more money for the 40,000 mental health units around the state that weren't getting enough money to operate. And then we got the city to make a commitment to include 15% of the units in every building that every housing bill that it funded for the homeless. At that point, it would have amounted to about another 1,000 units a year for homeless people. Then COVID hit. Then the feds decided not to provide any relief to cities and states, and the city cut its capital budget by $1 billion, which means about 20,000 less units in 2 years. So 15% of zero is zero. So we got a great success until the rug was swept under us. And now a lot is waiting for the federal government to decide to bail out or to help the cities and states that have been there. I mean, New York City have been doing a lot, but we can't do it alone. So, but I think it's important to understand the causes and understand what we can do to change things. And we are, in little ways, I think now on the Upper West Side, the challenge of helping folks to kind of embrace their neighbor. I'm suggesting developing a little kind of community hospitality corps, do a life skills of 10 people, find the people who, want to make a difference, do some training in community work, give them a uniform and they can stand on the street and help their neighbors, be the model, be the symbol of the folks in the shelter, be a role model to the people in the shelter, be a role model to people in the neighborhood. Well, these people aren't so bad. They're here to help us. I think there are things we can do even with the constraints, but I think there's so much we can't do now until COVID, it gets better and until we have some more funding. We're very limited, but there's still things we can do. I think the key thing we can do is in our heart. When you see a homeless person, see them as a member of your family, and at least open yourself up to the degree that we can safely, open yourself up to their struggle. I mean, I remember many years ago, I saw a man on the street. He was an old Chinese guy, Asian guy, walking across the street with his head down. I just looked at him. I looked him in the eye. It blew my mind. He put his hand on my arm and he said, "Thank you so much." He started crying. It was just because I saw him. All I did was see him. And people, as Dennis said, when you are treated as invisible or worse, for someone just to acknowledge your humanity, make all the difference in the world.
Wow. That's a really powerful story. Thank you. Just to kind of wrap up and tie this up a little bit, I think I wanted to highlight some of the things that you said. Part of, our struggle now during COVID is community lifts us. And right. Community is part of the healing process that you're suggesting for the homeless. And so right. I think all of us are struggling in terms of how do we attach ourselves to other people because we need that to kind of lift us and strengthen us. But I like very much what you said that, well, we have to prepare for when we're on the other side. Uh, this is temporary, however long it might be, but we're going to prepare for the other side so that we're ready.
Yeah.
And we will get there. And the other piece, again, the two other things that I do want to emphasize is that one of the things that I find really remarkable about what you said is, like, you said New York City is not too big in a sense. I think most of us in Long Island, at least myself, I look at it as like, oh my God, if I could just do my little town, that I live in, I'd be really happy that I've accomplished something.
Right.
So if you're looking at New York City is not too big, that you can wrap your arms around, then I can certainly here in my small town of Long Island perhaps do more and make an impact. So I thank you for that.
Well, Dwight Eisenhower had a wonderful quote. He said, if a problem can't be solved, enlarge it.
Well,
sometimes the answers are beyond the little circle that we're looking at. The answers may be beyond our town. I think the challenges in our town are great, because then we're really confronted with who is our neighbor, and what can we do. But I think wherever we are, if we let that be our guide, that these people, we know scientists say we're all related. We all come from the same mother. 750,000, whatever it is, we're all related. So how would you treat your member of the family? You may not know them, but treat them with an open heart, and at least say, how can I help? What can I do? Can I be present for you? That's the start.
And that's the concluding thought that I want to leave everyone with. Too often we talk about, the homeless or homelessness, and it's individual human beings who are part of our family. And that's how we should be speaking about it. And that's how we should be, including those people as part of our family and our community. And that's really how we begin the healing. So, Marc,
from there, we learn after that. Once we start with that, then we can learn. I've been doing this 35 years. I know a lot of people now, finally. But we learn. We open. Our interest opens us up to more people who want to do the same thing. We find fellow travelers out of that compassion.
Right. So, Marc, thank you very much for joining us and offering us this inspiration on this Monday morning. Boker Tov and good morning.